Hello and welcome once again to Crazy Comics and Stories. It's me, your charming and delightful old Uncle Rat Bastard, and at the other end of the series of tubes and wires that we call the internets is Joe, Crazy Writer. How you doing today, Joe?
I'm telling you, I love popsicles. I mean, most people like popsicles, but seriously, I love popsicles almost as much as you love pie.
Really?
If that's possible.
No, I love the Popsicle Twins when they were on the Gong Show.
Oh my!
And that one you can look up. You go ahead, look up Popsicle Twins. Now, whatever you do not look up Lemon Party. Okay? Do not look up Lemon Party. Have I been clear about that over the years, Joe?
Hang on. 2 popsicles and a twin. Oh my! So basically, that's all they did was to come down and just eat popsicles.
Yep, and boy, did Chuck Barris get in trouble with NBC over that one. Here they are, the Popsicle Twins! Oh, silly 70s network TV. We got a book to review.
We do, and this is a big-ass book.
Why, yes, it's a scholarly book. And
I have a confession.
Oh, well, I'm not Catholic, but hold on a second. Let's see here. Go to the internet.
You realize, I mean, my superpower is, so next time of course, every time I try to spit on you, you duck, but, you know, all I have to do is spit on you and make the sign of the cross, and you'll be Catholic.
All right. Joe, I don't know who you are. You may confess your sins, my son.
I did not read the book.
What?
However, yep. The book in question is Jim Shooter Conversations. Conversations with comic artist M. Thomas Ng, if I'm saying the name right. Let's see who else. He's the general editor. It's edited by Jason Sachs, Eric Hoffman, and Dominic Grace, and published by the University Press of Mississippi Jackson. And there's one reason why I didn't read this, because I am going to buy it.
Oh!
Reason why I'm going to buy it, and usually we beg, borrow, or,
beg,
forget.
It's a beg? No. Yeah, beg. Thanks, Joe. You messed me up. It's buy, borrow, or ignore.
The classiness. I have several other conversations book. I've got one with Dave Sim. I've got one with Howard Chaykin. I absolutely love these books. Essentially what they do is they give a biography of the comic creator in question. In this case, Jim's got quite an impressive one. Kind of an introduction, which is kind of a synopsis, a little bit, I would like to think a little bit more in depth than you'd get on your typical Wikipedia. From there, a chronology of his life, and then they get into different interviews from different aspects of their career. In this case, they start with one in 1969, one in 1974, a Legion Outpost interview, one in 1981, one in 1982, another one in 1983. I mean, this is a huge book. You're talking over 200 pages of interviews. Everything is documented. And they even talk about in the introduction that there's 2 interviews that they did not include, and they tell you where to go find them. So if you want to talk and listen about this, it's almost like listening in. And I think these books are wonderful. And anytime you see one of a creator that you enjoy, you owe it to yourself to just pick it up. So without even reading this, and believe me, I'm going to read this, and I'm going to enjoy it. I call this one a definite buy, and it would have been more fun had we been able to had it when, have him back at the con so we could actually get him to autograph it, because that would even be even sweeter. That being said, Cory, did you actually read it?
I read most of it. There was some of it that I had already read because I had read the older interviews when he was at Marvel. So I read the interview he did in the 60s when he was still writing and a teenager. I read the interview when he had left comics.
Mm-hmm.
And then I read the final interview. And I skimmed the others. But as Joe said, this is not a comic. This is an interview book. And if you are interested in Jim Shooter, this is definitely a book to get. The earliest interview was for a fanzine, and it's pretty easy to tell that the guy sent him a bunch of questions, and Shooter typed out his answers and sent them back. In the later interview, I don't know if they sat down with him or did the same thing, but it really felt like that. One of the things about a written interview that a good interviewer can do in a written interviewer, but many other people don't, is they can follow up. And in the early interviews, there aren't any follow-ups to some of the things that Shooter said that were pretty interesting. One thing that just jumped out at me was he constantly talked about, he got to the point when he was working for Mort Weisinger at D.C., that when the phone would ring, he would panic. He would just freak out. And for years, whenever the phone would ring, he'd get that panic response, because what would happen is, Mort Weisinger was not a kind human being. He basically was very well known for calling up the writers and screaming at them. Artists he was a little nicer to, because especially people like Kurt Swan could very easily say, Mort, fuck off, I'm going to go work for Julie Schwartz. And Julie Schwartz would have jumped on that in a heartbeat. So he was nicer to the artists than he was the writers. But Shooter talking about what it was like working for Weisinger was fascinating when he talked about it when he was a teenager and then after he left. But also talking about how in 74 it's like, I don't think I'm ever going to work in comics again. And a year or so later he's working at Marvel. Also, he talked about his first stint at Marvel where Stan hired him and he really couldn't afford to work there. Stan wasn't paying him enough to survive in New York City. So the final interview reads a lot like the stuff that he talked about at the convention. But I wanted to point out a few things that were new to me, because another thing with the interviews is there's a really long introduction. It goes.
Let me ask you this question. Do you notice any difference in style between his really early one and you said you read the latest one?
Oh, yeah, the real early one. A teenager's just going to be very blunt about things and doesn't expand a lot. And the 74 interview, that's a guy in his early 20s who's pretty disgusted with the whole idea of comics. And again, very blunt and not a lot of detail. In the last interview, this is a man who's in his 60s and much more prone to answer as a story rather than just an answer. So the last interview in the book is a very good interview. It has a lot of the flaws that when Shooter was here or on his blog, where he will rewrite his history to make himself out as the victim and the hero. I'm the only person that Stan trusted. What's fascinating to me is the interviews at Marvel where he praised Jim Galton. Jim Galton's the savior of Marvel and the savior of comics and the greatest guy I've ever worked for. Then in the last interview, it's like, Jim Galton's a no-good motherfucker who needs to die, sort of thing. So, but there were some tidbits that weren't in the interviews, that were in the introduction, such as, Joe, had you ever heard of the Shooter party that John Byrne threw?
It sounds familiar only because I think it's something we've talked about.
I didn't know about this one. A couple of months before Jim Shooter was fired, John Byrne, who was working over at DC, held a party and had a bunch of people from both Marvel and DC at his party, and they built an effigy of Jim Shooter out of copies of the New Universe books and burned it. So they had a party where they burned Jim Shooter in effigy.
Making New Universe titles worth more money.
And all I could think is, I don't think I could ever deal with being hated that much. Because the story got back to Marvel, and that's why the new owners fired him. They're like, oh, this man is really hated. We got to get somebody who isn't causing this much trouble with the staff. But I've had shitty jobs before, and I've never thought, oh, I'm going to build an effigy of my boss and burn it and invite all my coworkers. Shooter, quite the controversial figure.
And tall.
Yeah, what about 6'6", 6'7"?
Yep. That's the problem is everybody looked up to him. Or he looked down on everybody.
But think about the fact that here's this guy, 13 years old. I've got to figure out a way to make money for my family. Looks at DC, goes, well, the Legion of Superheroes is the worst book they publish. I could do better than that. Sent in a story, and the editor said, oh, yeah, I'll buy this. So, on the buy, borrow, or ignore, myself it would be a borrow because I can't see myself reading it a second time. For me, this would be a book that if it was at the library, I would check it out in a heartbeat. But again, you and I have different feelings about Jim Shooter. You have a fondness for him that I don't.
Well, he kind of was guiding Marvel through my golden age of comics. So a lot of times the things that I read, I guess that overshadows it. And really, I guess I look at it that way, despite all the other stuff that comes out later.
And for me, Shooter's
the
guy who destroyed my golden age.
I will caution, though, this is more of a textbook.
Yes.
So the cheapest price I've found is the $40. So if your wallet's tight, you might want to go the route of borrowing it if you can.
Yeah.
But all I know is that every Conversations book I've run across, I've absolutely adored. So definitely, if it's somebody you care to know more about, be it for good or bad, I definitely recommend this run of books.
And I do have one piece of news I want to talk about, Joe. One piece of comics
Are
news.
you talking about how the spam heist that in Hawaii prompts recallers to our retailers are going crazy about it?
I did not know that there was a spam heist.
Well, I didn't know that either because every time I click on Washington Post, I get we're glad you're enjoying this. Keep reading for $1. And I got 2 words for you, Washington Post.
No dollar.
I'll be saying them later when we get to freaking.
Oh,
but and you've already said it already, so it's not like we're crossing any new boundaries here.
Yeah, we've got the explicit tag, so if we want at some point, I can tell my 25-minute version of the joke, the aristocrats.
Well, we should save that for one of the inevitable fill-ins we're getting.
Or we should save that for one of the anniversary issues. The ladies.
I heard the nice lady. All right. I'll just continue from what I was trying to say. Because you were talking about aristocrats. What we could do is I could just give you... Here, I'll give you 2 sound bites. Cory, you keep saying you're going to do it. Tell me your version of the Aristocats. And then you can put this at the end. Oh, that's pretty good. Okay, go ahead. Hit my music.
It's aristocrats.
Who cares? I never say nothing right anyways.
Which also is one of my favorite stories about the movie The Aristocrats.
Cats.
Have you ever seen the DVD of that movie?
I had it for a while. I don't know if I still do. The
commentary's by Penn Jillette, and I forget the name of the comedian, but they talk about how they went to a showing of the movie, an afternoon showing of the movie, and a mother brought in her 2 children. And they were stopped and said, this is not the Disney movie. You're thinking the Aristocats. This is a very different movie, and it's for adults only. And the woman said, I know what movie I'm going to. I understand. And she went in. And about 25 minutes later, she and the 2 children left. And all Penn Jillette could think about is it took her 25 minutes to realize that this isn't a movie about dancing cartoon cats. If you don't know what The Aristocrats is, the movie is a documentary about the world's dirtiest joke, and it is a joke that comedians tell each other. It always starts the same way, and it ends the same way. And it starts with the comedian saying, this family goes in to see a talent agent. They say, we've got this amazing act. Every town we go to, it sells out. We'd like you to find a theater in this town to book us. And the talent agent says, family acts don't do real well. And the father says, no, ours is different. And then the comedian, for the middle of the joke, will talk about the most perverse, disgusting things you have ever heard of that the family does while they are on stage. And it's not that the acts themselves are funny, it's the fact that it just keeps building and building and building and building. And then when the father is done, the agent says, oh my God, that's horrifying. What do you call this act? And the father says, the Aristocrats. There is a version in the movie. I never saw Full House. Who's the comedian who was on Full House?
Oh, I'm going to really feel stupid because I don't remember.
Anyway, he's telling his version of the joke, and it's about 5 minutes long. And he stops in the middle and looks dead in the camera and says, could you make sure that the Olsen twins get a copy of this joke so that they know just what Uncle Jesse's like? And then he goes back, and it's the filthiest, most terrifying thing you've ever heard. And
Bob Saget.
That's it, Bob Saget. And it ends by playing the version by Gilbert Gottfried at the Hugh Hefner roast, because Gilbert was bombing at the Hugh Hefner roast. It was a couple months after 9/11, and Gilbert, who's the most tasteless comedian in the world, started telling 9/11 jokes. And the crowd turned on him. And they said you could see the panic in his eye, and he started to tell a version of the Aristocrats. And the audience and Hefner himself had no idea what was going on, but every comedian in the room knew and just started howling. But maybe that's what we'll do for episode 400, Joe.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll just use comic book characters and tell a version of the Aristocrats. But no. I've got actual news, comic news, big comic news. And it's sad news, ladies and gentlemen.
Uh-oh.
Sad news. The first of the DC Rebirth books has been canceled.
And what were the... Hang on, let me call the bookers in Vegas. Okay, the odds are up. Okay, what did you think it would? Okay. Cory, tell us, which one was canceled?
Superwoman.
Oh, the odd makers did not have that. Oh, the pot is boiling. The gig is up. The race is fixed. The gig is in. Oh. Well, gotta learn not to bet against the Rebirth.
Well, one of the reasons why this is kind of a big deal and why I wanted to highlight it is with Rebirth, DC said that they wouldn't be canceling books as quickly as they have in the past. If a book wasn't working, they would bring in a new creative team and kind of do some creative work on it. Well, I guess the sales on Superwoman got so low and nobody was invested enough in the book to rejigger it and bring in a new creative team. So Superwoman is no more, and I am betting that we're going to see some more books from Rebirth dropping, because there were books that were selling far worse than Superwoman. I'm looking at you, the new Superman. Whereas Marvel cancels books right and left every day.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, there are a couple of books that I have heard literally are just... Marvel is ready to end them and has told the creative team once the sales drop to a certain point, it's over. So don't be building any long-term plot. That would. I'm not going to point at Spider-Man: Renew Your Vows, but I'm pointing at Spider-Man: Renew Your Vows.
Yeah, I could tell. Well, the world needs quarter boxes too.
You don't though, because you got rid of all yours.
That's true.
And we're going to continue what we started, I think, back in, when did we start this? Back in the 50s,
I don't know. We'll have to look sometime.
I think it was back in the 50s when we did part 1 of the DC Dream Teams. Joe, do you remember the premise of the Dream Teams?
Yeah, fantasy booking.
Yes, these are, these are books that the DC would be putting out, and we come up with our dream team. It doesn't matter if this person's not doing comics anymore. It doesn't matter if the creative teams hate each other. This is what we would want to see, the creative teams that we would like to see. The only caveat I put on mine is that the creator cannot be dead. Otherwise, it would be Jack Kirby doing 20 books a month.
Pretty much everything, yeah. And he could do it, too. That's the point.
Yeah. So the first, we did part 1 a while back. So now we're going to do part 2.
Yep.
And I'm going to start with the book that they keep rebooting because, well, it's a DC horror book and the character's still showing up on TV once in a while. So Hellblazer. The creative team that I have for it is Stephen King, who is a comic book fan and has dabbled in comics at DC before. He was the co-writer of American Vampire for a while. And the artist would be Michael Gaydos, who's mostly known now for the work that he did on Alias and the new Defenders comic. But I think he would do an amazing horror book. And I would like to see Stephen King, probably the best horror writer alive, and Michael Gaydos take a swing at Hellblazer. Joe?
Now, for me, most of the creators that I've figured out that I want, I did in part 1 already. And what I tend to come down to is just concepts that I want to see either redone or perhaps revisited. For example, in a similar vein to like what you're saying, I would like to see them take all their horror characters, Hellblazer, Swamp Thing, their version of Frankenstein, whatever other goofy stuff they got going, and get Richard Corbin to work on it. Kind of reshape the horror DC universe. I mean, you think about all the characters that these conglomerations hold. I mean, we did it with Marvel, we're doing it with DC, and how many of them just languish, either because they just aren't relevant or they just don't do much with them anymore. I kind of talked about it earlier where like for space, I'd like to see, Jim Starlin do for their universe what they did with DC and or Marvel, and DC actually has that, and I think it's in place. It just needs someone to gel it together, and I think in the horror universe, I'd like to see him do it. He could go reach out and get people like Alan Moore and King and Vike and get those guys together and let's or even Garth Ennis or Grant Morrison. Let's create some horror. And especially since they're not bound by the Comic Code Authority anymore, I want to see some real horror. Mr. Strode?
The next book that I have is The Teen Titans.
Not the Tiny Titans?
No, not the Tiny Titans. Titans.
We're going to let Alzek have that?
Of course.
Oh, good.
But Teen Titans. And the creators I have are 2 female creators. First is G. Willow Wilson, who's best known for her work on Ms. Marvel, and has shown on that book that she can write teenagers better than just about anybody working in comics right now. And then for art, it's an artist who's mostly done covers, and actually recently announced on Facebook she was going to be stepping away from doing art to concentrate on her other career, and that's Megan Hetrick. And Megan Hetrick is someone who draws some amazing, amazing stuff, but also is able to draw teenagers that look like teenagers. Her teenagers don't look like mini adults. And I think one of the problems with a lot of books based on teenagers is that while their faces may be kind of drawn like a teenager, their bodies are drawn as if they're in their mid-20s and are swimsuit models or on the cover of porn magazines.
Yeah.
But, I would like to see Teen Titans by G. Willow Wilson and Megan Hetrick.
The next one I got is Wonder Woman. And I'm kind of torn because I couldn't decide which creators I would like to see on it. It'd be nice to see George Perez back on it. He did a wonderful Wonder Woman right after Crisis. She was kind of innocent, learning the ways of the world, but she was no pushover. I mean, someone could knock over a tank if she needed. He did a wonderful job with bringing in the mythology. At the same time, I know Walt Simonson could do a similar good job with the mythology, tied up with the Greek gods and maybe even spilling over into the other pantheon. I can't even say the word. Pathogens?
Pantheon.
Pantheons. Oh, you leave your pants. Yeah, my pants are on. What? Yes, thanks for asking. As far as artists go, if you're going to have Wonder Woman, you have to draw someone who can at least draw powerful women. Good. I would vote for either Amanda Conner or Adam Hughes. If you're not familiar with either one of these two, well,
you got a problem.
You're not paying attention here. A close second would be Brian Boland. I have to go back and look because one thing with Wonder Woman is she's action orientated, and the last couple books I've read with Brian Boland were more not so much action orientated. I mean, good story wise in terms of sequential art, but not really action. So again, I'd have to go back and look. Regardless, have him do all the covers because when he did that in a later run, it was just magical. Mr. S.
The next book I have is The Titans, which is the characters who used to be in the Teen Titans, but now they're grown up. And this would be a nostalgia pop. And also, people who have not worked on these characters before, and that is Roger Stern as the writer and John Byrne as the artist. One of the things I like about this team is when John Byrne works with Roger Stern, he defers to Stern on the major plot points and helps on the smaller plot points, but he also turns in a better caliber of art. And if you want proof, look at their run on Captain America. That was Byrne's best work at the time. And because he and Roger Stern trusted each other, he didn't run roughshod over him and fight over the plots and everything. They meshed very well and they worked well together. And I think The Titans is one of those books that, because of the run in the 80s, DC keeps trying to do it. But aside from a few people like Jeff Johns, nobody seems to be able to get it right anymore. I think Roger Stern would have that old-school mentality that would work with these characters. Joe?
For Superman, I want to bring back John Byrne. Something I loved about his run on Superman, it's probably the last time outside the death of Superman that people actually cared about him. Again, in my fantasy world, you're going to, he's going to be reined in. Sorry, John, you don't get to eliminate everything.
You don't get to kill. Superman doesn't get to kill.
He's not retro continuity. He's totally new 52, and just go forward from there. But I love John's art. I liked it when he was writing Superman, the big Barda thing notwithstanding. And I'd like to go with that and see if we can't get something fun going again. Mr. S. Art and writing, by the way. Just John. It's totally John. 100% John.
Next book I have is The Legion of Superheroes. This is a book that, as we've seen over the past 30 years, is hard to do. And another thing about it is I'd like it to be real science fiction. So I've been holding this writer in reserve through all of the Marvel stuff and into this DC stuff. Joe, I'm finally throwing down the Grant Morrison card.
Ooh.
Grant Morrison never worked on the Legion of Superheroes, but he's done stuff with superhero teams, and he's done excellent science fiction stuff. I would like to see Grant Morrison write it, and I would like to bring an artist who worked on it in the past, still has a fondness for it, and that's Colleen Duran, who brought a very bright, clean art style, which I think would work because the Legion of Superheroes to me only works when it's in a positive, optimistic future. And Grant Morrison's stuff might be weird, but it's never down and depressing and everything's horrible. Even All-Star Superman, which was about the death of Superman, was bright and happy and filled with fun and joy. So I'd like to see them work on the Legion of Superheroes. Joe?
Now, well, I've taken on the big three right away. I'm going with Batman, and I was trying to think of what to do with Batman. I mean, you always have a big Bat universe, a Bat family, and I think the core Batman book, and I don't know if you want to make it in Batman, maybe better off in Detective Comics, but I'd like to see the team of Max Collin and Terry Beattie on art doing it. They've had a good run. I mean, I've just been reading some of the Mysteries and some of the other work that they do together. I love Terry's art style, and I think that might be the group that could bring back more of the detective side of Batman. So often Batman's either written for the longest time as just a dark thug, or he just, we need to know. Nope, Batman knows the answer. Never mind how he found the answer or why he knows it. I'd like to see more of the detective in Batman. And for some reason, this team, I think, could pull it off. As far as the other action-orientated Batman, I don't have anybody really in mind. Who did you have down for, Cory?
I had Howard Chaykin doing one book and Mike Mignola doing the other.
Well, good. We're going to have 3 Bat books. I get detective. So, all right. What else you got for us?
The next one is Green Lantern. And I have a choice that's, again, pretty nostalgia, but it's a team that has shown that they can do excellent science fiction superhero work, and that is Mike Baron and Steve Rude.
Ooh.
What Jeff Johns did with Green Lantern was catapult him up into the stratosphere. Green Lantern was always kind of a second-tier hero, but when Jeff Johns took over and started building that mythology, during that time, Green Lantern became part of, I would say, just as big as Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. Now, it's taken a fade in the past few years, especially when they overextended and had too many Green Lantern-related books. But I think put these guys on Green Lantern. Nexus was a guy who hunted serial killers. Put them on a space cop story. You're going to get some excellent, excellent stuff. And just with Steve Rude, the aliens will look like real aliens. Joe?
Let's see. Walt Simonson, take care of the New Gods. I want to see, he's total control. He's going to do the Fourth World. It's going to be great. I'm telling you, Walt Simonson on the Fourth World, it's going to be great. It's going to be good. I got an omnibus here to prove it. That's what I was told. But I just would like to see him. He's got a way of doing large mythic stories and also bringing it down to actually their lives, what's going on, especially if they're smaller characters. I'm thinking of his run on Thor. I'm eagerly awaiting to read what was the omnibus I got? Was it Orion or was it?
Yeah, Orion.
Yeah, I want to see it. They've already, in the new universe, they've cacked off Darkseid. I think our dark babies out there, I don't know what they call them, baby side. But,
baby side.
It's baby side. But it's a chance to rebuild the whole thing, do the battle. I mean, it was the one thing that always drove me crazy about pre-DC Universe. It was always, we're going to mess with Darkseid. Whoa, okay, well, we're going to back off now, Darkseid. Well, the next time it happens. And, Grant Morrison did an awesome run on Final Crisis. Well, here's your chance. Call it the Fifth World, if you want, because, they've already established the Fourth World is pretty much gone. But I think it would be great. I'd like to see the war, the peace, and how it affects the rest of the DC universe. And Walt's my man to do it. If he's not busy writing Wonder Woman, well, you could tie in because you got so many of the characters in the DC universe tie into the various gods. I mean, obviously Wonder Woman, Captain Marvel's another one. You've got Swamp Thing. I don't know if he's currently a elemental, which is more of a god level type thing. But, once the gods start dancing, us mortals tend to notice that stuff. I'd like to see what and where we can go with that. Mr. C.
I had a version of the New Gods with Walt Simonson as well, but I did not have him drawing it. I had Ladron drawing it, Jose Ladron, who I talked about in the last episode, who did a run on Cable, did a run on a comic called Hip Flask, and does a style of comics that is like Kirby merged with Mobius. And last episode, I decried the fact that he's not doing comics anymore. Bring him back, put him and Simonson on the New Gods, and you're talking, this would be a superstar book. This would blow the doors off. Joe?
Now I don't really have any books left, per se, but I do have one concept that I think DC has kind of abandoned, and I really think they ought to come up with it. I'd like to see them restore the Elseworlds concept. There are so many different concepts. I'm sure they get, what if Superman was a Labrador and the Labrador was Superman? Whatever. Ooh. Just make up your own.
I would like that.
It's a Wolfie story. Wolfie could write it. But even here, I've got a couple here, like Superman, A Nation Divided. What happens if he'd landed during the Civil War? There was some wonderful runs of Batman, and of course, sort of out of my reach, I'm not going to bother with that. But you could take almost any character, and let's get some top creators, or even not so top creators. If you got a decent concept, let's do it, and just mix it up. I like the idea they come out once, and you could even go a little bit further, and not necessarily. Well, you call them like a what if. I mean, what's a pivotal event in the DC universe that if a character didn't change? What if Darkseid didn't lose? What if he won? Or what if the Monitor didn't die? What if Flashpoint was restored? I mean, you'd have to not call it what if, obviously, because you'd have, somebody knocking on the door.
Hello?
But just the Elseworlds concept, it's just something that they can have some fun with. And by Gumby, bring it back. Q.
Let's see. Next book that I have, Green Lantern Corps. Because
Corpse.
Well, that too. Well, are there any dead Green Lanterns other than the Black Lantern?
There's a whole thing of dead lanterns. You could go in there and talk to them if you want.
Yeah. But here's my idea. Alan Moore and Chris Sprouse, the creators on Tom Strong, doing Green Lantern stories. Just they pick Green Lanterns and tell whatever stories they want to tell about any Green Lantern ever. And yes, I know he'll never work for DC. That's why this is a fantasy. This is dream teams. This is what I want in my dreams. Joe?
Yes.
Should I just continue on my list?
You might as well, because I only got 3 things left.
Well, let's do your next thing.
Okay. I want to reach out to creators of the past that are still alive and let them show their talents one more time. Can be an Elseworlds story, especially if it's somebody that may not be currently working and it doesn't want to work in the New 52. I just think that would be a lot of fun, and I can't even think of creators because everybody I kept looking up, had passed away. But even like Pat Broderick, who I met at the MCBA show, he did Firestorm amongst a billion other characters. Let's sit down, get him to work. There's got to be some key names, or do like you did again with Elseworlds, where you had Stan Lee come in and write some stuff. Yeah, it didn't really work that well, but try to. Cory's thinking along the same terms. Let's go find some of these guys who just aren't working and would like maybe, I don't know, Steve Ditko, come play in our universe for one time. What do you want to do? He might not want to do anything, but that's the point. You can go out, reach, ask, make a decent one-shot on it, and if it ends up being fun, hey, you might drop into some regular series. You just don't know.
The next book I have is Swamp Thing. I would like to see a Swamp Thing by Doug Mensch and Kelly Jones. They did Batman in the 90s. Kelly Jones is actually the person finishing up Bernie Wrightson's Frankenstein sequel. Bet you didn't know that was happening, because they just announced it a couple of days ago. But Bernie Wrightson and Steve Stiles, I think it was, were working on a sequel to Frankenstein, and Bernie passed away. Kelly Jones has been tapped to finish it. I would love to see them do a horror book, especially if you remember their 3-book series with, what was it called? Because it's all collected now in Batman vs. Dracula. But there were 3 books, and now it's all in one. But, oh, that was such good stuff. And Mensch is an old hand at writing horror. I'd like to see them do a Swamp Thing, because it would be creepy as hell. Joe?
I know Warren Ellis is trying to get Wildstorm going. I still think I'm torn. I want to see the characters back. There was a lot of characters there that I enjoyed. I enjoyed Gen 13. Maybe Gen 13 should be written by the same team you had Teen Titans down for. Or maybe we'll get the Legion of Superheroes. Colleen Doran could probably draw them. Just something to get the characters going. If you want them, hiding in the background. We talked about this a little bit in the past podcast. What was the thing that DC just picked up and is integrating into their universe?
The America's Best Comics stuff by Alan Moore.
And I'm kind of like, you guys kind of mucked up Wildstorm. Everything else you've tried to bring in, like Shazam, they did a good run of Power Shazam, but it just doesn't stick. And there's got to be a way to use these characters and make them entertaining. I mean, maybe have Wildstorm be kind of the background story until. Oh wait, they're doing that with Watchmen characters. Anyways, you get the gist.
On Watchmen babies.
Yeah. There's got to be something you can do here. If you want, I don't know. You keep alluding to the Grand 52 that nobody ever visits. Just bring them back in their own universe. Whatever. You got Jim Lee there. He's got to have a few ideas. Jim?
That's weird. I don't think I put Jim Lee on a book.
No, we didn't.
Okay.
And I like Jim Lee's art.
The next book I have is World's Finest. I would like to bring back the Superman-Batman team in a book called World's Finest. And the person I would like to do it is Scott McCloud. Scott McCloud had an excellent run on a comic in the 90s, Superman Adventures, which was based on the animated series of Superman. And I know Scott McCloud only does big books now, but I would like to see him
books and you can't deny, because Scott just can't sorry.
I would like to see him do a Superman-Batman book, because I think it would honor the histories and be just as creative and interesting as his run on Superman Adventures. Joe?
My final thing, because I don't know where my last page went, because we originally had 25, and I was lucky I found this page. Again, I like crossovers. I stare mostly at Marvel because they're tending to go crossover free, but DC still is doing it. They seem to be doing quite a bit with Dynamite, and there's so many characters. I don't want it to be just, we happen to bump into each other. I want a mechanic down. Yes, they're different universes, but they somehow get together. How do they do that?
You want access.
I do, actually, because I was just, I talked about the Silver Surfer Superman that I read earlier. And as long as, again, what would they call it in Marvel, Nexus of Realities? I don't know if DC has a similar thing. Hey, Hellboy popped in one day. Oh, what the hell's going on? I need to get home. I would love to see DC and Marvel get back together and do crossovers. We always talk about comics are down, comics are kind of, going backwards. We don't know what they're doing. People like to scream, social war, justice warriors, they're ruining it. No, they're not. We're going to do legacy numbers. Bah! You just take away some of the fun. And not every Marvel DC crossover was equal, but it was fun. And to just take that off the table, to me, that's, what's the poker term?
Leaving
money on the table. Yeah. And, whatever again, in my world, these personalities and the lawyers aren't fighting. They're just going to, hey, let's do some crossovers. Maybe they peaked with Justice League Avenger crossover that I still read that. It's just so much fun. It just makes me wanting more, and it's a possibility. Why not have an Avenger Justice League crossover like, hey, their alignments are together, Crisis on whatever, or a Secret Crisis Marvel DC whatever. Good Lord, man, I loved it when the Robert Urich Love Boat crossed over with the original Love Boat. I like me my crossovers.
You watched the Robert Urich Love Boat?
I thought it might be fun. Plus, it was the hour before wrestling, so there was like nothing else going on.
I was going to say, I think you might be the only one who did.
Charlie's Angels was on the original Love Boat.
Yes, they were. Next book I have is The Outsiders. Outsiders is a book they try to bring back every so often. It was a team created in the 80s when the new Teen Titans was hot, where Batman would lead a team of quirky heroes as well. I like the idea. I always like The Outsiders. And the creative team I have is Warren Ellis. Yes, I saved Warren Ellis till now, laying down the Warren Ellis card. And drawn by Derek Robinson, who's the man who drew The Boys and Transmetropolitan. So he had that long run on Transmetropolitan with Ellis, so they've worked together before. And Ellis is really good with outsider quirky heroes. If you don't know about that, go over and read those issues of Next Wave that Marvel did. So I would like to see them team up and do something weird with The Outsiders. The other book that I have that we haven't talked about, The Demon. The Demon is a Kirby character. Demon hasn't had a book in a while, but I think I've got a good creative team. Scott Snyder, who did Batman for a long time, and is now the guy in charge of Metal, or as Joe calls it. Joe, say Metal the way you say metal.
I'm sorry, my brain just thought of something else, but I'll talk about it when you're done.
You no longer say metal the way you used to?
No, I've grown up and moved on. Well, I've moved on. I haven't grown up.
Okay. And the artist would be Chris Bacalo, who has done X-Men stuff and all kinds of cool stuff, did the Death miniseries over at DC, and I think him working on a Kirby character with Scott Snyder would be a lot of fun. Joe, your last idea?
I might have said this before, but, you kind of sparked something with me when you were talking about Demon, because that to me could also fit under the horror, but part of horror is also magic. I'd like to see Tim Hunter come back. They always talked about how he had the potential to destroy the DC universe and to become kind of its overlord. Well, how many years has it been since we've seen him? He's there. He's not the bumbling kid trying to learn stuff. He's the young adult, and this is the crossroads. He's either going to go one way and be a force for good or one way a force for bad.
It all depends on if Zatanna goes out on a date with him.
Oh, could be. You did hook up with Batman. How could you dig a chick who could talk backwards? And I don't. Who were the Books of Magic guys? I don't. My copy's buried behind me.
That was. I know Peter Gross drew it.
Yeah, and John Ray Niebuhr.
Yep, John Ray Niebuhr wrote it.
Okay, that's the creative team I want, and bring it back. Way back in the Books of Magic miniseries, or was it Book of Magic? No, Books of Magic. That Neil Gaiman wrote. They talked, Mr. E, that was his big thing. You see, you already got yourself a villain set up. And he was saying he wanted to kill Tim Hunter because he didn't want this future to happen, even though there was no guarantee it would. all I just remember is the superheroes being all beat up, and Tim's like looking at something on the top of a heap of dead bodies, you know. And I know they've kind of dealt with it a little bit in the original series, but this is the new 52. You know, if Daniel can come in out of nowhere and you know, stick around with some metal.
I thought you didn't say it like that anymore.
Well, you guilted me into it. Okay. And again, a concept that was fun. I talked about it earlier too. I'll talk about it again. Solaris from the DC 1 Million. What a scare! I mean, I look at the drawings of that, and it is truly a horrific being. And maybe it's because I'll talk about it more, you know, because I just finished reading the DC 1 Million, and just in the final attack while they're trying to stop it, I mean, hundreds, if not thousands of super beings died, and Solaris, after frying them with various radiation or heat, kept them as rotating mini planets around itself as it was slowly working its way towards Earth. What a terrible, horrific, crazy comic villain. And, you know, if we need to get Grant Morrison to write the return, so be it. But, I mean, these are some really kick-ass characters that are just left on the table. You're looking for a big event. You know, stop recreating dark metal characters. Just bring back some of the old concepts that you seem to have forgotten. Unless, you know, Grant Morrison owns a piece of Solaris, in which case I got to pay him. I mean, whatever. It's all about my comic book fantasy.
The last book that I have is a name that's been around DC for a long time. It's probably one of their best-known names, and that would be DC Showcase. Much like when I had Marvel Comics Presents, when we did Marvel, I would like to see DC Showcase, where you have people who may not be able to, much like Joe talked about, they're not going to sign on for a regular series, but they could come in, they could do a 3-part story, they could do a 5-part story. Yes, I know anthologies don't do well. I don't care. This is a Dream Team. This is where you could get Chris Claremont doing the Teen Titans, kind of doing the story that he hinted around about. This is where Marv Wolfman could come in and finally do some of those stories that he wanted to do about the Flash. I like the idea of an anthology book with a rotating creative team. When Marvel did it with Spider-Man, with Tangled Web and books like that, I always jumped on those. And Legends of the DC Universe was a book that I absolutely loved, even though it didn't do well. And there for a while there was a JLA and a JSA anthology book, and those didn't do well either, but I loved them. So there you go, Joe. There's my DC Dream Teams.
Dream Teams. Do you think anthology books like that would be better off as miniseries rather than trying to do an ongoing one?
Probably, but the Dream Team. This is my dream. Much like how Marvel Comics Presents had, you know, stories that, you know, continued, and I'd like to see something very similar like...
It was a good dream.
You know who also puts together Dream Teams, Joe?
I'm thinking. I don't have a clue.
These guys, our sponsors.
No.
That's right. Here at the Solitaire Rose Radio Network, we have ads, and our first sponsor is me. That's right. Your charming and delightful old Uncle Rat Bastard. I have my first book out with Dangerous Dan Moore. It's the first 100 strips of our online web strip, Worldwide News, the story of the lowest rated cable news network. And you could get yourself a copy with commentary, with all sorts of extras, with signatures and everything. Just email Dan over at LordShadowFlame@gmail.com. Our top sponsor, who's been with us since day one, is DreamHost. DreamHost.com. You need yourself a website, and DreamHost.com is the #1 web host in the whole known universe. Just head over to DreamHost.com, put in the code KRAYZ, KRAYZ, get $20 off your first year. How can you beat that? Our other sponsor is Graze, Graze. gmail.com. Healthy snacks for a healthy lifestyle. Just head over to Gray's, put in the code CORYS 3R5P. Your first and fifth box are free. You could get them weekly. You could get them bi-weekly. You could get them monthly. You could just order a whole bunch of them. It's great stuff to keep you away from the vending machine at work. Now, if you would like to leave a comment for any of the podcasts that we do, we'd love those. Go ahead and email us at solitairerosenetwork@gmail.com, or you can call 952-856-0519. Operators are standing by. Okay, it's just a place that will record your calls, but we'll play them on the air. We'll answer your questions. We love getting feedback. Tell us what you think. Ask a question. Suggest a topic. Be a guest. Send us your stuff. solitairerosenetwork@gmail.com. If you would like to advertise on any of the Solitaire Rose radio shows, you can. Just email us at solitairerosenetwork@gmail.com. Subject advertising. Thanks. And after we do the sponsors, we ask Joe the most important question of the week. Joe?
What are 101 other uses for a condom?
No. What's going on the eBays?
Well, I actually put a copy of that up on eBay. And it's an old book from Apple Press. And believe me, it's commanding some serious money. But since mine's only in fine shape, mine's actually at a pretty decent price. I've been slowly getting stuff onto the eBays. Cory, do you have a copy of Words Without Pictures?
Yes.
It's a Eclipse 1990 books, has just some hackers named Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, Weiss, Bolton, Evanier. But copies of that are very expensive on eBay. I got the cheapest one up there. The aforementioned Silver Surfer Superman is online. I put up a bunch of Vampirellas. One of the more interesting things I actually saw at the MCBA show a couple weeks ago was a real copy of Overstreet's 1970 comic book price guide. And Cory, let's ask the Strode. Are you ready?
Yes, I am in the thinking chair.
Why wasn't there a number one on this price guide?
I don't know, but I probably would think that they would just think of it as an annual, or that it may never get printed again.
Yep, and if you go to your back issue 100, you can read the story about Overstreet and setting it up. I only have a reprint that in 1993 they were giving it away as kind of a promotional guide, and it itself is pretty hefty. I mean, $50 is what I'm asking, and again, I'm the lowest price on eBay. I saw an original one. Our good buddy at Dreamhaven, Greg Ketter, had one at the show, and it was just kind of funny to kind of, oh, wow, he's got a real one. And you can have it, too, for a mere $500.
Oh, only $500. That's dirt cheap.
Yep. Cory, you got $40 in your pocket?
Not in my pocket, no.
Oh, well, if you did, you could have bought my Elf number 48, the old Marvel comic.
Is that the seal issue?
Yeah, the bloody seal. And again, I have the cheapest price on eBay. That's kind of what I've been doing most of the day. I got oodles of stuff up. And sometimes it's actually interesting because I apparently have the only copy up. You remember The Pro?
Yes, I love that book.
Amanda Connor. I apparently have the only third printing on the eBays, so I put it up. Lest you think all I do is put things up on eBay, I wanted to talk a little bit, some of the things that I just sold on eBay. Underdog Comics #1, for the new one from Underdog. It was the one that had the Action Comic homage on it, which seems to be very popular. I sold a Sandman #22, which is the first appearance of Daniel, but not the first appearance of him as the replacement on the Dreaming. I did sell a Sandman #4. Cory, what's significant about Sandman #4?
Was that no, Justice League was in 3. I don't know what was important about 4.
The first appearance of Lucifer.
Oh, that Lucifer would be big now.
Big, and again, I put mine up cheap. What made mine more interesting is it was signed by Neil Gaiman. Cory, we were there. Tell us. Let's delve a bit into the story about when we got to see Neil Gaiman at Dreamhaven.
Which time?
This was the one where I think you could actually see him, and I actually had him draw a little sketch for me. Because I think I only had, Sandman was up to like issue 20, and I brought my whole Sandman set, and he actually autographed each one. He asked me, do you want them personalized? I said, well, I'll throw in a few. And yeah, on the number 4, he actually wrote the word hell. On some of the other ones, he actually, some he said to Joe, some he drew a little picture. He gobsmacked everybody by when I handed him my sketchbook for just a signature, he actually drew a picture of Morpheus. And everybody was like, wow. He said, that's not that good. He said, what, do you ever think of just drawing an issue of Sandman? I said, well, no. I mean, I will draw out storyboards when I need them, but I'm not going to do that. So that was kind of fun. What do you remember about when we were there?
That was when it was for the book that Greg Ketter printed of all of Neil Gaiman's short stories. And I picked up the book, but I also had a copy of Snow Glass Apples that I'd had for a while. And he was kind of, oh, you're one of the people who bought this. And he was kind of impressed that I had it. And we talked for a bit about Tori Amos, because she had given him a shout-out in one of her CDs. So we talked a bit about her and how I'd seen her at First Avenue, and he said, oh, so we were at the same show. But that's what I remember about it. And also, while that was a big line for Dreamhaven, it was not a big line for Neil Gaiman. I mean, it didn't even go outside.
Yeah, and this was back when you could actually sit, like Cory said, have a conversation with him. It wasn't just a quick belly button signing and a thank you. I think there was, about 100 people there?
Yeah. And
yeah.
He also did a reading, I believe. I also think he read one of the short stories. Yes.
He did the Snow Apples at the University of Minnesota. And now I'm, in my, I'm like, I know I had a copy of that because it was just fascinating. I mean, his take on the Snow White tale was just amazing. But I, for the life of me, would have no idea where my copy went. I either gave it to Dana or I might have sold it. I just don't know. So the last thing I'm going to ask is if, Cory, I sold a copy of Ant number 1, the Diamond Retailer Summit holofoil variant cover that was signed by Ant's creator Mario Gully. What is so significant about that?
I do know that he sold the rights recently to Eric Larson, and they're trying to do a kind of a reboot of the character and make the character a big deal. But that's all I really know about Ant.
He sold it because he apparently did something dumb and had a criminal problem. Ended up, nope. And actually what's funny, people are saying, hey, look at that, it's a comic book signed by an actual felon. Some of the smart comments from Falcon. But, he's living up to it. He's trying to pay the price the society wants, and part of that was he sold off Ant in order to, cover the bills. And it'll be interesting to see. I hope he gets on his feet again. But, I had all this fun stuff on eBay. Some is still on there. Some is sold and gone. KRAYZ, and as I say every week, if you're a listener of the show and you do say something, I may not have as vast a collection as I used to have, but it's still pretty big there, and I will definitely throw in something fun. Could be a copy of Worldwide News. Could be the aforementioned 101 other uses for a condom. You just never know what I'm going to do.
Trust me, I know that's true.
That is true.
Well, and now that we're done finding out about the eBays, it's my favorite part of the show. No, not where I make a French bread pizza and eat it while Joe watches. It's Freaking and Geeking. Joe, what are you freaking about?
Well, my commission from Pat Broderick still hasn't shown up. He hasn't emailed me to let me know if he shipped the bloody thing. We're coming up on 2 weeks. I don't know, Cory. When do I shift gears and start getting nasty about it? I don't even know what to do anymore, you know.
I would just send him a little Facebook message, say, hey, Pat, just checking on my commission. Do you have an ETA on it?
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much what I've been doing. You know, I know life happens. He's working on a book. He's got his own self-published work. I'm sure he's doing other commissions, but the bottom line is I got $800 wrapped up in this thing. I want the damn commission. I'm not freaking out. I'm not freaking out just a little bit. Work's been kind of negative lately, mostly because people are just negative. And you know, I'm working in baggage. I mean, you get that one coworker that everything's a crisis and complaining, and it just kind of brings everything down. And I just found myself getting kind of crabby, which is probably good that I'm in bags because, you know, the bags don't tend to talk back while I'm trying to, you know, use my sailor voice. And it's like I said, the one thing you can say in baggage that you can't say to your significant other, people, you put a lot of faith in that little nylon zipper, don't you? And I just tell you. And next week, actually, as we're speaking now, Minnesota goes through this weird thing called the MEA, which is Minnesota Education Association Teacher Weekend, where they go off and do workshops and things, and the kids have 3 or 4 or 5 or the whole week off. And a lot of people take that as a mini vacation because they get to they're expecting more people at the airport today than they expect after Thanksgiving, and that's pretty much the big fly day of the year. People are getting called in for mandatory overtime, which is always a pleasure for people. And the problem is a lot of times they take people from baggage and say, well, you're going to work on checkpoint. And the soup's on checkpoints where the bins automatically return, and so there's no bin running. Because if you don't, you're going to take them off and back and spend a half hour doing what it could have taken you 10 seconds here. So a lot of people are mad. A lot of people are crabby. And I'm mini geeking in the middle of all this. The top 3 guys at our airport said hi, and, you know, granted we were busy at the time, but when they left, I was like, you know, I actually feel a little better. You know, I mean, I really didn't get a chance to talk to them, but they stopped by, said hi. You know, so if you happen to be a big ass boss, you know, stop by and say hi to your guys every so often. It actually, you know, made a difference. All right, I was going to say this earlier, but I'm going to say it now. CBS, fuck you. I mean, we're going to talk about it this week. I was going to say, Cory, let's talk about it. I guys at work want to talk about it. I'm a big Star Trek fan. Nope. Apparently, when I went to go look at my recording, I got half an episode of Oprah arguing with some dumb putzes over politics, and then I didn't get any of the end of Discovery. From what I looked forward, you know, I fast forward through it. It looked pretty, but really, CBS, on the day you've been flouting this thing for the better part of 2 fucking years. You know you got football. You know things are going to run over. Yeah, it's nice and dandy that you run your little scroll. Star Trek Discovery will be run later. You know, it doesn't help DVRs. And it's been so long since I've DVR'd something off a major network that I totally blanked. Oh, maybe I should have put a little extra time on the cover for any football shit that might have happened. Apparently the guys kneeled a little bit too long, and it took all that extra time to... Yeah, never mind, strike that. It has nothing to do with anything. But really, you know, this is not the way you're going to get me to cough up $8 a month to watch your fucking program. If I can't even watch the first fucking thing to begin with. So as far as I'm concerned, it's Star Trek Discovery doesn't use the black hole in my ex-girlfriend relationship. I just don't care.
When it shows up on Netflix, it's awesome.
Yeah, I hope so. But by then I probably won't give a damn. The only other thing I'm freaking out, just got a lot of doctor appointments going on. Got to go see the dentist. Got to go see my eye appointment. Got to have contact with my rheumatoid guy who's leaving, which is kind of depressing because, you know, nothing's worse in your life than when somebody leaves it, be it, and I'm not talking family, girlfriend, but I'm just talking people you can trust on. Like if you have a car maintenance guy that you absolutely love because he knows he'll take care of you. or she, you got a doctor in my case, or you got a lawyer, or a shop you like to go to closes, or the guy just disappears or is out of your life, or worse, dies. In the case of our old friend Nick, or like I said, the aforementioned car mechanic, just an old salt of the earth guy, wonderful guy. I mean, bring your car in, he'll take care of you. Passed away. It's like you lose something. A little bit of comfort level's gone. Well, it's this way with my rheumatoid arthritis doctor. He's retiring, thank the gods. 35 years, I think he deserves it. But I before I was diagnosed that I had rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, people, take your hands and move them up like you're buttoning a collar. I couldn't do that. Reach down like you're putting on your socks. Couldn't do it. This was 2002, and it took 6 months before I got diagnosed right, and another 3-4 months before I finally got to the point where, like, hey, I'm not in constant pain. It still comes back every so often, but, it kind of disturbs me more than I realize, I'll probably find somebody new. Matter of fact, he sent a letter, and he gave me like 5 or 6 new people I can choose from. In reality, only one, because everybody else is on the other side of the frickin' town. It's like if I have a doctor appointment, I'd like to at least go to the clinics that are like within a mile of my house. So, my general practitioner called and he said, hey, we got a ton of blood work, so drink a lot of water because we're taking a gallon out of you tomorrow. And it's a fasting one, so in 8 minutes I cannot eat anymore. So hopefully your freaking's not too long and my geeking's not too long. And who cares? I'm going to go get something to eat. Cory, what are you freaking on?
First thing I'm freaking on is that Chuck Dixon has announced his new comic series. Now, normally that would not be a freaking. Chuck Dixon's, he's a solid hand. He can put together a story with the beginning, middle, and end. I haven't read anything by him that I just, shake my head and go, oh, that's terrible. But there's also nothing from him I've never read and went, wow, that was cool.
Tell me it's not the Kickstarter comic book that was a white supremacist comic book. That
yes,
was
it is.
For the sweet love
from writer Vox Day, the guy who tried to game the Hugo Awards a few years ago. He is putting together a comic book series, and he even had Milo Vera, who gives a goddamn-alus, talking about how, well, the way they're doing comics now, Superman's going to be some illegal immigrant Muslim woman. Well, Superman is an illegal immigrant and always has been, so shut the fuck up. But their ads make me just angry. It's the one that really pissed me off is they showed a couple panels from Ms. Marvel. And what was the ad? We would deport Ms. Marvel right away. Why? Why do you feel you need to say stuff like that? Unless you're trying to get racists to buy your comic. The next thing was the characters smoking a cigarette. Disney and Marvel won't let their characters smoke. We don't believe in that PC crap. Well, the reason Marvel said no smoking is because the editor-in-chief at the time had a close friend die from lung cancer. So he didn't want to be promoting something that causes cancer in characters that are aimed at teenagers. Gosh, how terrible. But Chuck Dixon has jumped on, and one of the things that really bugs me about him, and it's something that I've known behind the scenes, but I haven't talked about, he will go on and on and on about how he's been blacklisted at DC. Joe, do you know why he was blacklisted at DC? Because when he went in for an editorial meeting, he went on this long rant about how he hates gay people to an editor at DC who's gay.
Isn't that part of the how to get ahead when an interview is to learn more about
that's
your
one
company?
of the things. If I were to go in for a job interview, and the person was a woman, and I started talking about how women don't know a goddamn thing about anything, I would fully expect not to be hired. Sorry, dude. You've been blacklisted by your own fault. You're a moron. And he's become one of these old guys. and I'm not saying that because he's old, but he's, what do they call him on Walking Dead? A porch dick. Yeah, the kind of guy who sits out on his porch and, everything was better before the Negroes and the women and the Muslims and the gay people showed up. Second thing I am geeking on is that the Simpsons comic, The Treehouse of Horror, came out. And that's always been one of my favorite comics of the year because they get people who don't normally do Simpsons comics, people who may not even do comics, to do stuff. They get special creative talent. This year, nope, it was just the regular people who do Simpsons books. So it really didn't feel that special. It was just an average issue of a Simpsons comic. It's like they're not even trying. Hopefully the Halloween episode of The Simpsons that aired the night before this episode came out was good. And the last thing I am freaking on, Marvel, after Secret Empire, said no more big event crossovers, right, Joe?
Yeah.
Guess what starts in January? The Avengers is going weekly.
More Marvel books, I'm going to quit.
With a 16-part weekly Avengers crossover event.
I'll probably
I'll read it because it's Mark Waid, and the stuff he's talking about sounds incredibly cool. But still, don't say you're not doing an event and then follow it up a month later with, it's not really an event, but we're making the Avengers a weekly book, and all of the Avengers books will be part of it. Yay! Joe, between you shoving food in your face, what are you geeking on?
Well, since I can't watch Discovery, my wife and I watched some of the old movies that we actually had started. Well, we skipped Motion Picture, don't we? Watched Wrath of Khan, which she enjoyed. We watched the next one, Search for Spock. Oddly enough, she had just watched the one with the whales, so we skipped over that. But we pulled out, actually, I think on Amazon Prime, most of these. We watched Undiscovered Country, which she enjoyed.
I hate that movie.
Yep. She thought it was...
No,
like
5.
it?
What's 5?
That's Search for God.
I don't know what the name of it is, but 5 I
skipped.
hated so much. I hated 5 so much.
We skipped.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
we skipped it. I know that was bad. I know it was, all that. I mean, there was some interesting things, but it was just not good. But we skipped that one. We did go into Star Trek Generations, which was, Chris and I were like, it's okay for what it was. Then we finished the night out with First Contact, which I think we had to switch to, wasn't on Amazon Prime. It was somewhere else, but we did get to watch it. That might be where we went. We did watch it. It's fun having Roku because you type in the movie, it tells you where it is and tells you if you can buy it or see it for free. So I did get me my Star Trek fix. I got to tell you, I am enjoying not working crazily trying to get comics in line for, selling in a year. I put about 25 comics on eBay, but I've done other things today. And I've also been in various areas where I get to work and read when it slows down. A couple of the books that I read, one of them I kept. I didn't realize I kept this because I blew out the other ones at the sale. The Young All-Stars number 27, which was kind of fun. And it might be one I'll probably hang on to because, of course, it's written by Roy and Dan Thomas. And Dave Simon's the editor, but it's essentially Fury writing kind of a blog of what's going on in the day of the life of the All-Star Squadron. And it covers almost every single character that they were allowed to cover. Sargon the Sorcerer's here. I see Our Man. Let's see, who's this over here? Johnny Chambers and Tubby Watts. Just if you're a Golden Age fan, this is just a fun one you should dig out of the quarter bins and read because she does basically cover everything. And it was towards the tail end of the run, which is too bad because if they'd just let Roy be Roy, he probably could have done a little bit better with it. I started to read, this kind of a mini freaking at the end, but I picked out X-Files Conspiracy. Starts with the lone gunman, and they're going out trying to discover just what this particular substance is that's killing people and driving people nuts. And of course, they talk to the Ghostbusters, and then they hear about these Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and they find files on the Transformers, and they run across the Crow. Well, not Jim Barr's Crow, but the whole Crow mythology. The only problem is I'm missing the last part of this particular series. And as you know, the problem is when you're trying to find a series that nobody really gave a damn about, it's almost tougher to find than something that's super hot. So, but it was a fun read. I mean, it was just an event crossover from IDW, but I think it's kind of an interesting thing. It really turns the X-File universe on its tail because, I mean, if you've got Ghostbusters, if you've got Transformers running around, there's no reason why you need the X-Files because they're pretty much a known quantity. I mentioned earlier about Overstreet's Guide, back issue number 100. I didn't get it. The only reason I'm reading 100 is because when my daughter saw Harley Quinn on number 99, she walked off with it. So I got off with it. But it's really cool because it covers Bronze Age fanzines and fandoms. Hard to believe in this age of the interwebs, but back when information was scarce, we used to buy magazines. I'm not talking Wizard, although that was part of it, but downright almost fan-run magazines. One of the big ones I remember is called the Comic Reader, where we'd get not only information, interviews, but also a list of all the comics that were coming out, which could be very valuable if you didn't have access to one of the distributor catalogs going on. They also cover the semi-secret origin of the Overstreet comic book price guide, the little tidbit I gave Cory earlier. The reason why he didn't put one on there, because he really honestly didn't think he'd ever make another one. He was just happy to print the one he had. And it talks a lot about how Overstreet made a price guide in a organization that didn't have a price guide. The people that didn't like the fact that he was kind of horning in on their racket. Some of the other things they covered, Buyer's Guide for Fandom that turned into the Comic Buyer's Guide, the Fawcett Collectors of America zine, which I think is part of Alter Ego now, isn't it?
Yep.
A couple things I was never aware of, the DC Comic Mobile. And the guy, was it Bob? The know-it-all. Thank you.
Bob Rozakis, the Answer Man.
And I believe his wife as Wonder Woman. But they drove this old Dodge van around, and this is basic. Cory's going to love this because he gives a minute breakdown of all the comics that sold. You just show up, pick up the comics, and go sell them. And I don't know what happened to the van. I think it ended up being sold to somebody, and then there was an accident involved. But I'd like to, they should make a little Hot Wheel of this thing. It was kind of cool. They went in and covered the Amazing World of DC Comics, which was a kind of a prozine put together by the pros, reprinting tons of old stuff that had never been reprinted before, especially things like the one that kept coming up was like the Kellogg comic magazine that you either came as a piece of the cereal box or something you mailed away for. They should actually do stuff like that now. I mean, just the reprint. They go into the Amazing World DC Comics Super DC Con that was in 1976. I knew a little bit more about this because I actually found a copy of this when I was haunting New York back in my travel days. From there, they go into Foom, and I've been trying to get a copy of the Foom that had the big Stan Lee interview that apparently has never been reprinted, and that's what got me thinking. When they get into the Carlton Portfolio and the Bullseye, and it's just a wonderful issue. I was born maybe 10 years too late to really love a lot of these things, but I did pick up on the tail end of things like the Comic Reader. Oh, Comic Buyer's Guide. I remember getting a copy, and I was so pleased with it, and I sat, and then finally, like 2 months later, I was like, okay, now I'm going to sit down and read it. And then I realized, oh, it's a newspaper. A lot of this is out of date. Well, screw that. I subscribe to CBG almost nonstop. The only time I didn't was when I had my comic store, and I ordered direct from Krause, as Cory can attest to, because he ripped the covers off a lot of these damn magazines to send them back. Drove Krause crazy because I'd only do it in 3-month plobs because I like to let them sit. Occasionally people would come in and buy the older ones. And, of course, I recycled all the old ones. I wish I had my collection of that. I have it when they turned into magazine format. And then, of course, it just ended. They never really let them have a last issue, which is really too bad. This isn't really an ancestral, but I'm curious Cory's opinion. Would you buy a FOOM omnibus or an omnibus of the Amazing World of DC Comics?
Yeah. I've read FOOM online. People post it. And there was one issue, and I cannot remember what one it was, but I remember hearing in the 80s that they did an interview. They posted an interview, and after it saw, because nobody paid any attention to FOOM in the Marvel offices, but once it was printed, the person who was interviewed got in a lot of trouble because he was way too honest in the interview.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they talk about that. I read it, and I remember reading about it, but I don't recall who it was.
Well,
but
if they talk about it in that, I got to read that article
because
I want to read that.
Reading through their making of Amazing World of DC and FOOM, I just wondered, there are probably some things that they can't do because they do a Conan issue, number 14. It's just like when we talk about crossovers for Secret Wars and that. There are certain licensing issues they probably can't do it. But it would be interesting if they could get away with it as like a scholarly publication or something. I would buy a omnibus of both these books right away. There we go. Look, more money on the table for DC and Marvel. I'm telling you, man, nothing but we do with this podcast. Just give. Oh,
damn right. We're giving away tons of money.
I finally read it. Volume 12, The Boys. Didn't have it. I went to Discount Comic Book Service, got it. For the price I paid, I might as well just got it off eBay or gone to the comic store because it was shipping and all. But I read it. For those of you who aren't aware of this, Cory, explain to our listeners what The Boys is.
The Boys is Garth Ennis and Derek Robinson's love letter to no, they hate superhero books. So it's a team that goes out and kills superheroes who've broken the law.
Yep. It started at DC.
And it's brutal.
It was too much for DC. They had found a home at Dynamite beginning at 7, and I think they reprinted all of the early issues, and it's available in various formats. I went with the 12-issue books that kind of collected the storylines. And for those of you who have read it, I stopped reading it for some ungodly reason back when Huey broke up with, I can't think of the name. Starlight was her name, or I can't remember the actual character's name. He was inadvertent. Well, I don't want to give away too much for people who haven't read it. But then again, what is it? It's a 20-year-old series, so.
Yeah.
But he was going out with a superhero. He didn't realize it. Anyways, when the shit hit the fan and he discovered who she was, he kind of freaked out and they broke up. That was the last I read of Boys because I didn't have the graphic novels. And I was able to find a few of them through Granite City. He had them for $5. I found a few on eBay. Could not find the number 12. Against my better judgment, I started reading them and I just devoured them. And then, of course, as I bitched about a while back, I didn't have issue 12. I got issue 12. Oh, look at it. Truly. Fantastic book. Stop this podcast here. Go get yourself a collection and read it. Okay, you back? Okay. A couple more books that I read. I got my next fix of Avengers, the Brian Michael Bendis Complete Collection. This particular one covers Avengers Prime, the series 1 through 12, and the annual. Both annuals, the new Avenger annual, and I have to go online. What's funny is when I had these books, I remember talking with Cory, most of the comics I had of this I put in my dollar sale and got rid of. The only ones that actually had a value was during, actually I think that was New Avengers Hickman run. Never mind. So they're just, they're awesome read. Not a lot of heavy value on them, so you should be able to pick them up cheap. I just picked up the graphic novel and just got rid of my comics. So instead of breaking my back on a bunch of comics, look, I got this graphic novel I can, a couple other ones I mentioned and I read. I picked up from Pat at the Con, Wonder Woman by Mike Deodato and written by William Misher Loebs. This is the run. Oh, where they don't even. Okay, Wonder Woman 0.
Taco Bell.
90 to 100, which reads better as a series. I remember buying these, and just out of sheer lethargy, and not ever reading them. But they had awesome Brian Boland covers. But they cover that storyline. Issue 85's thrown on, which really doesn't tie into anything. And they also cover their Legends of the DC Universe 2-shot. Again, a fun book. I do remember what the hell was going on, so it wasn't really, I guess you could kind of jump in. But it helps to know what was going on when Wonder Woman. This is a far cry from George Perez's beginning run because she's a little bit more seasoned. The only thing they didn't include was when Artemis, who took over Wonder Woman's role, I'm not giving away anything because it's right on the front cover. They didn't put the issue in where she goes to the Justice League apparently thinking that she's going to take Wonder Woman's spot, and they kind of said, yeah, no. So that was kind of disappointing. And I read me Hookjaw, the complete original series. You know, this is a magazine. It's kind of cool because they give a good forward and a ending of Hookjaw. It was part of a magazine by, if I'm saying this right, Cory, the creators that eventually went on to do 2000 AD.
Yep.
And basically, Hookjaw, he had two things to do. First of all, he had blood on his jaw, and he killed somebody every strip, every issue. Every comic of Action Comics, which was, again, this was in England, had this particular run, and that was the number one thing they said. Hookjaw had to kill somebody, and usually in a fairly gruesome, bloody way. And they cover the three different storylines, including the storyline that helped get Action banned and brutally cut short. They show not only the version that was published, where they kind of just ended it by Hookjaw kind of going out and out, and then they also show the original art, and you can see where they kind of cut and paste it all together. They didn't finish the last story, so don't get your hopes up too high, but Hookjaw's still out there. That's all I can say. So, mighty fine reading. Oh, and I mentioned it earlier. I finished reading the big old DC 1 million omnibus. The way it was meant to be read, just slowly, and everything in order, the way it was supposed to be. If you can, I mean, this thing's hovering around $50, $60. If you can find yourself a chance, go check it out. And see why, even looking at the cover with Solaris on it just gives me a chill. Oh, man. Cory, what you geeking on? What's lifting your spirits this week?
The first thing is, it started as a freaking. It's Halloween week. Well, Halloween month.
It's also my daughter's birthday, so if you want to send her accolades or stuff.
Which daughter?
Holly. Get it?
Oh.
Holly for Halloween. That was Dana's idea.
Ah. But I wanted to watch the Universal Monster movies.
Holly from Land of the Lost. But no, I'm sorry, what? Universal Monsters?
Yeah, because they were showing some of them on Turner Classic, but it's the ones I've seen, a few hundred times. So I bought the Legacy sets back when they came out in 2004, and then I looked, and 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 eventually I said, I guess my son must put them in a box somewhere. Guess I won't get to see them. And then I was tooling around online, and I saw, they put out updated versions a couple of years ago. Oh, and they added all the movies that are missing.
Ooh.
Because it's October. Amazon had them all at half price. So I bought the Wolfman box, and the Dracula box, and the Frankenstein box, and the Creature from the Black Lagoon box, and the Invisible Man box, and the Mummy box. I did not buy the Phantom of the Opera.
You're wondering why Cory works all this overtime and stuff. I mean,
yeah. But, they were $13 each. for like 5 and 6 movies. I did not buy the Phantom of the Opera Legacy Collection because it shows one movie, and it's the one from 1943. They don't even have the silent Phantom of the Opera, which is the good one. So, yeah, I am all set now. And the thing is, the ones that I got were, they came out the same time as the movie Van Helsing, so there's a lot of, oh, here's the director of the movie Van Helsing talking about these movies. I don't fucking care about the director of Van Helsing. The movie was shit. So it's, nope, these are, you know, but they've also got the Abbott and Costello movies. They've got the crossover movies. So for House of Dracula, which has Frankenstein and Dracula, it's in both the Frankenstein set and the Dracula set. So I'm very excited, and when I get some time off, I'm going to watch a whole bunch of them. On Facebook, Scary Terry Beatty went out to Walt Disneyland and took pictures of all the cool Marvel stuff they've got. They've got comics, and they've got graphic novels, and they've got T-shirts, and they've got stuff, and they've got rides, and they've got people in Marvel costumes. And I didn't know that they had done so much adding of Marvel to Disneyland over the last few years. So I was really geeking about that, and maybe I'll go out there one of these days. No, let's hope that they did it at Disney World too, because I don't want to go to L.A. again. L.A.'s terrible.
L.A. lady.
L.A. Another thing on Facebook, it is Inktober. Do you know, Joe? Do you know what the Inktober is?
That means check your pens because you got a big old stain in your pocket.
No. It's artists, much like with NaNoWriMo, where us writers say we're going to write a 50,000-word novel in the month of November, which is coming up very, very soon, and I should probably get a little worried about that. No, it's artists will make a inked drawing every day. And they put out a theme at the beginning of the month, but a lot of people don't follow it. But the cool thing is, it's not just, amateur artists and people who do art for a hobby, but there are a lot of creators who are doing it. Bob Lipitsky, who did Uptown Girl, is doing New Gods characters. He's doing a different New Gods character every day. Mark Stegbauer is doing it and putting out some really awesome work. There's a lot of artists who, oh, here's today's Inktober sketch. It's fun because they're just doing sketches of characters, and it's usually horror-related, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm just enjoying seeing all the art on Facebook rather than, Trump's a this, and you're a cuck, and comic-wise, James A. Owen, who did the comic Star Child in the 90s and has done some other books, is starting a new magazine. So if you become one of his Patreons, he will be sending you an actual magazine which has fiction and comics and drawings and all sorts of stuff like that. And I will have a link in the show notes, but I'm really excited because I really like James A. Owen's stuff. I recently picked up his Drawing with Dragons trilogy of books, which is part fiction, part autobiography. And they're just wonderful, wonderful books, and I'm excited about his new magazine. And the last thing I am geeking on, Marvel announced the stuff that's coming out in January. And yes, there's a couple of omnibuses I'm interested in, and we'll talk about stuff like that later. But there's one I just can't wait. I cannot wait. It's a book that came out in the early 90s and has never been reprinted, and I have no idea why it's never been reprinted. Joe? Do you remember the Fabian Nicieza, Kevin Maguire Adventures of Captain America 4-part square-bound miniseries?
I don't think I do.
It was the thing that Kevin Maguire did right after he left Justice League. And he and Fabian Nicieza did a story set in the 40s, Captain America story set in the 40s, and it's beautiful. It's Kevin Maguire, so it's going to look beautiful. And it's Fabian Nicieza not doing a bunch of, it's Fabian Nicieza writing a story rather than doing what the editors told him to do. And he really plays to Maguire's strengths. And it's so good. And if you've never read it, it's one of the best Captain America stories that's ever been printed. They are also pairing it with Carl Kessel's little experiment he did that I talked to him about in the interview I did with him, where he did a 3-issue miniseries of a fictional Captain America newspaper strip that was in the papers in the 40s. And it's written and drawn like one of those old adventure strips, like The Phantom or Little Orphan Annie, or Terry and the Pirates. And Carl Kessel wrote and drew it, and it's excellent, and they're going to be putting that out as a trade paperback. I don't even need to see it to tell you to buy it. I'm giving it the Strode guarantee, which means if you buy it and you don't like it, let me know and I will buy it from you, because it's so good. It's one of my favorite Captain America stories ever, and it's got some of Kevin Maguire's best art ever. You can tell he just loves Captain America and loves doing stories in the 40s. So very excited about that book coming out, and January can't get here fast enough. Believe it or not, kids, you've listened to us blather on about funny books for an hour and a half.
Thank you.
And as we say every week, the comic we like the least, we still like better than the comic that you like the most. Joe?
Well, Cory, I got good news and I got bad news. Which one you want first?
I always want the bad news first so that we end with good news.
All right. If the bad news is I need your help because the next thing's a knock-knock joke. The good news is it'll be the last DC superhero joke I will ever give you.
Oh, thank goodness.
Okay,
volume. Go ahead.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Crypto.
Crypto who?
I have to crypto quietly through the door because I think Chris is sleeping on the other side. Meantime, hit my music!